We'll find the truth one of these days. Welcome, everyone. This is going to be my review of the X-Files Season 1, Episode 6. It is called Shadows. So, spoilers for the episode as always. This episode is about a young woman who works at a company that deals with... It wasn't a weapons manufacturer, but it was like mechanical parts. Because part of the plot is that the evil guy in the company was selling parts to a terrorist group, which led to a van bombing. But that's like a in deep part of the the backstory, the premise. The main thing is this young woman is upset because her boss committed suicide, and she seemingly has Carrie-like telekinetic abilities. In fact, Scully even references Carrie at one point when Mulder suggests such a thing. She also later references Poltergeist when Mulder suggests that, which turns out to be more the case. That's the big sort of thing of this episode, is that it starts off presenting itself as a woman's got telekinetic abilities, but it turns out it's actually a ghost of her former boss who is doing all this stuff to protect her. The first thing I would like to say about this is that, and I could be completely wrong about this, right? And I don't think it's happened too much yet, but there was something that happened twice in this episode that I could see becoming a trend in this, a trope, if you will. And that is the idea that Scully is conveniently just absent, even if it's only by a few seconds, to something blatantly supernatural. Because repeatedly throughout this episode, Scully says things like she doesn't believe in ghosts or telekinetic abilities, but she believes that this young woman believes it, so let's, look into what we're doing, blah, blah, blah. But there's twice in this episode. One is when they come to see her after she's called for help, and the second boss, because this company had like two bosses, effectively, and one boss killed the other boss. And she was friends with the boss that died. This other boss is the one who's been doing these shady dealings. But he sends like two, hitmen after her, effectively. And when Mulder and Scully get there, like one of them's already dead, their throat's been crushed by the ghost. And Mulder comes in, Scully's not in there yet, and the other guy is like floating in the air as if he's been held by the neck by a invisible force. And Mulder sees this. Mulder sees this man floating in the air before he drops to his death. And then Scully comes in like seconds afterwards. And I thought to myself, that's a little convenient that Scully didn't see that, because that would really make her question a bunch of things, wouldn't it? And then likewise later on, when they're searching the offices of this place, everything sort of went poorly. It seems like they've not found anything. And then the ghost intervenes and helps, almost killing his old business partner, but ultimately having lots of paper swirl around the room. But he holds the old boss up against the wall. He makes a pen fly across the room, and then he rips open like the wallpaper or whatever to reveal a hidden floppy disk, which has got the evidence on it they're looking for. I actually thought Scully was in the scene for a bit, and then I realized it wasn't cutting to her reaction, and I went, wait, did she leave? Did she leave the room? And then it eventually cuts to her. She's in the other room, hearing some commotion and running over to see what's going on. And I thought, damn, they've done that twice in this episode, where there is undisputable supernatural stuff going on that Mulder's witnessing all, and feeds into the fact that he's always jumping to these conclusions, but Scully sees none of it. And I wonder if that's something we're going to see happen at least early on, frequently. I hope not, because it's a little bit of a cheap trick, but we'll see. But it happened twice in this episode, so I wanted to mention that. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this episode, actually. It's kind of, it's got... I think one of the things that I'm appreciating about this show is that sometimes it can just go into straight up horror movie style direction. The scene that I mentioned before, where Mulder walks in and there's already a dead hitman, or hitwoman in that case, and then the other hitman's like floating in the sky. It really did feel like a horror movie for like a minute, and I feel like most of the episodes have had at least one or two scenes like that. Squeeze had a bunch of them, but this one, does have a couple like that as well. I think the idea of the friendly ghost helping the living person by protecting her. Because at first it looks like she's getting attacked by these two guys from this terrorist group. She's at the ATM and these guys attack her, but then they turn up dead with these weird injuries that look like they've been crushed from the inside. And there's these mysterious agents investigating it. They've asked Mulder and Scully to come and look at the bodies and see if they can figure something out. And the implication at the start of the episode, I think, is that they're investigating this because it's spooky, but they're like higher up the food chain. But what it actually turns out is that they're investigating this because they're investigating what the company's been doing with terrorists, and they just can't explain this weird death, so they bring in Mulder and Scully hoping that they'll have some kind of answer because they investigate the spooky stuff, which Mulder lies about and then investigates everything on his own, as he's wanting to do. But yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about this one. I think there's... I think it's maybe just a little... Saccharin's not the right word. It's not quite the right word. I think there's just something about the premise of, like, you know, because this show to me, right, partly from my pre-existing idea of it before I watched it, but even now that I've watched it, like, part of the fun of the show is the vibe and the atmosphere, right? And it's not been exactly what I thought it was going to be, admittedly, up until this point. But one thing that it's definitely had is that atmosphere. And part of it is the mystery of the unknown. And Mulder jumps to these conclusions, and that's all fine. And so far, every episode's undeniably been about a real thing. And that's fine. That's not what I was expecting, that part, but that's fine. But I think there's something just so casual about, like, having direct proof of a ghost, which feels like it's out of a completely different genre of paranormal. You know, Ghost is more afterlife. I mean, Mulder and Scully even talk about the afterlife towards the end. But it's a very different type of thing. There's a big difference between aliens and then by extension to aliens, monsters and stuff. Whereas, I guess the difference is that one's paranormal and one's supernatural. And I guess up until this point, everything's skewed more paranormal, meaning, you know, mysterious life forms we just don't know about. But then there's a very different feeling to me to know someone died and became a ghost, and they're now helping someone and effectively acting as their bodyguard. Partly because they've got unfinished business and they want the bad thing that the other boss did to come out. Not just that he killed him, but that he was doing this unethical thing with his company. Which is the dispute that led to his death in the first place. Maybe part of it is that I just never really got invested in the main character of this episode. What's their name here? Lauren Kate is her name. You know, the episode opens with her being sad about her boss's death. And then I think part of it is maybe, like, once she's attacked and, like, you know, there's a supernatural force that fights back and kills the guys, and you think it's maybe her with her telekinesis. And I think maybe that's the problem with this, is that the first posed theory, which is telekinesis, is leaning more towards a superpower and therefore more towards science fiction, whereas a ghost to me is less science fiction and more towards supernatural mythology. And that's not just inherently bad. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think I prefer this show to be leaning towards science fiction. So the idea that she was unknowingly doing this with her brain was more interesting to me, I think. So when it started to hint that no, it's actually like the ghost of her dead boss who's doing this, I think I just inherently was just a little disappointed by that, just because I didn't think it was as interesting. Part of that might just be down to taste more than anything, but I think with the character herself, it was more engaging to me when I thought she was going to discover something about herself. But then as the episode went on, she never really learned anything about herself. She was just learning about the fact that there was a ghost around her, helping her, like, try and solve this crime that happened at her place of work. It was never really about her. Like, you could literally throw any character into this role. She doesn't learn something that improves her life. She doesn't, you know, find out this inner strength that she has to now maintain or control and realize that she can fight back on her own. She never really has that. The closest thing she has to maybe kind of making a decision on her own is choosing to help the FBI and the NSA or the CIA, like, investigate the crimes. That's like I guess the arc that she has in the episode, but it's kind of like minute compared to the all the things on top of it, which is there's this supernatural stuff going on around her, and she just kind of gets creeped out by everything. The boss is kind of creepy with her, and I think the first time you see it, you read it as maybe he's just sexually harassing her, but then it kind of skews, and you realize that he's intimidating her because he's concerned that the other boss that died told her what he'd done, and that she is a potential threat to him and a witness. So, but so much of this is just kind of about how she fits into the plot that everyone's investigating. So what starts off as a character who might have this hidden ability, which could be used to tell a story about how she finds this inner strength, and then how to choose to harness it or deal with it. Let's say she did accidentally kill two guys that were attacking her early on. There could be an interesting element, and I guess what I was looking forward to was her realizing that she had in some level done that, and having to like come to terms with, did I kill these two guys? They kind of deserved it, obviously, but at the same time, how does she like cope with that? And all of that just kind of got shifted to the side because none of that was really what happened. A ghost did it for her. Probably the biggest character moment that she really has is when the ghost is about to kill the other boss towards the end. She yells out, "No, don't do that. Help us put him away. Help us catch him instead." And the ghost listens to her. But I don't think the relationship between her and this dead boss is ever remotely interesting. I don't think I care that she's upset about his death. I don't think it really ever feels more than a plot device to sort of build the mystery on. So I think fundamentally, if I'm feeling a little bit disconnected from this episode, it's that everything revolving around this main character feels like it exists just to tell the plot, rather than we're telling a story about her. But the episode still presents like enough of her screen time and devotes so much to her as if we are telling a story about her, but we're not really telling a story about her. And I think that disconnect, in not being that interested in, because they don't give her enough interesting like traits as a character to really get into. And the episode even ends with her new job, and like thinking she has a little moment where the ghost is maybe there, and then it's not, and she sighs a sigh of relief, and she sits down and just thinks fondly back to her boss, and that's how the episode ends. And that left me feeling a bit cold because I don't really, like I said, everything I've said in the last 5 minutes is that I just don't really care about her backstory with this boss, because they never made me connect to her as a character. The one thread they had with her early on, they took away because that's not what was actually happening. So instead of like her dealing with something she's going through, it's this external force that's around her. And that's not to say that the plot as a whole couldn't have worked and you couldn't have made me care about that, but I don't think the episode does. So yeah, I guess that makes me feel a bit murky on the episode as a whole. Like, it's not as silly, obviously, as the Jersey Devil got last time, but I think I enjoyed the Jersey Devil episode more because I thought it had more cool scenes, and I really liked like the first like half of the episode, give or take. It got really silly after that, but at least the silliness was something that was amusing to talk about. Whereas with this one, I don't really feel like I've got a lot of silly stuff to kind of talk about and go into. It feels a lot more, I don't know, mundane, I guess, in comparison. So I guess it's the classic example of what's better, something that's just okay, or something that's bad enough to actually be interesting because it's bad. This kind of falls into the mundane, middle of the road kind of category. Mainly because I never really could invest in the main character story, and she does take up a lot of this episode, and she is a lot of it. There is one really good intentional laugh in this episode where, and this is funny actually because it plays into something I was talking about a few episodes ago, is the idea that Mulder's always right even when it feels like he should be wrong sometimes, and he just and he does it in this episode actually, where he just jumps to like believing there's a ghost, and he's like, he's still watching over you, isn't he, Lauren? And I'm like, all right, Mulder, calm down. He even though he's right, he jumps to the deep end so quick sometimes. But there's a moment where Scully says, no, there's a logical explanation for all this, right? We're seeing this blurry photograph of him in the window at the house, right? Because they've been taking some surveillance photos. And they do the old enhanced trick on it, which is really funny because early on in the episode, they've got another photograph of something. It's from the ATM security camera. And she actually, Scully says the line, the resolution's too poor, there's no way to enhance it. But later on, when they're looking at this other photograph, she's like, enhance. And I get that it's probably a much better camera because this is like an actual, long lens photography camera that's been used for surveillance versus a crappy CTV style camera. But I did think it was funny. She pointed out how we couldn't do this earlier, but then they do it with another photograph later. They are very different. They come from different sources, and I buy that this is a much higher quality camera. But still, I'm just putting it out there. But she says no, he must have faked his death. To which Mulder says only one man's ever pulled that off, and his name's Elvis, which was a mildly cute joke. But Mulder's like, you know what? You may be onto something. And Scully even pauses and goes, wait, Mulder, you think I'm right? You never think I'm right. You think I'm right? He says, all we really have to do to prove your theory is to prove that he's still alive. And it deadpan cuts to an extreme close-up of this woman's face, just saying the line, he is very dead. This man is very dead. The actress Lorena Gale plays this character, who's like either the nurse or the doctor at the coroner's place or whoever it is, and she's just so deadpan about saying, no, this guy is definitely dead. He was drained of all of his blood, and they go down a little rabbit hole of maybe suspecting it wasn't the like his body, maybe it was someone else. But eventually that's proven as well to just be him. So it's like, no, he's definitely dead. And I don't know if they ever really go back to Scully's like explanation of that, or like, she obviously hears the news that no, that this guy is definitely dead. It can't be him that's doing any of this. But she never then reflects on the photographs and thinks, well, if he's not dead, then how do we explain these photographs that we were there to take? It never goes back and examines that with her as a character, which maybe is a slightly missed opportunity, just to give her a little moment of maybe there is something real going on here. I can't explain this. There's a little bit of an action set piece scene where when they first go to speak to Lauren, she doesn't really tell them anything. She's getting ready to move. She's packing. It's not a big thing. But they go out of their car and the ghost tries to crash them by, making them go backwards down the hill, and they crash into another car. They have the car checked out, everything's fine. The one interesting detail is that the lights are still on even though they're turned off because of the electrostatic energy. And this tracks with the dead bodies from earlier, where the arms were still moving a bit 6 hours after death because they still had some pent up energy from, I don't know, the supernatural forces leave some electrostatic discharge around. I don't really have any comment. There's some obvious stunt doubles right towards the end of the stunt in the car, which is fine. I get the impression that they probably get away with that better back in the day, because I'm watching this in HD now. It's been beautifully remastered, and I'm thankful for it because it makes watching a show like this so enjoyable to see it in this pristine quality. It's so weird to see 1993 looking this good. But it does occasionally reveal maybe a stunt double, which back in the day would have been, they might not have like went out of their way to hide it as much because they knew that no one could tell in TV resolution. Whereas movies are a little bit different, because movies were shot, well, this was also shot in film, but movies were going to be projected with film, right? So movies, even in theaters, were projected at high quality film on a giant screen, so maybe it was a more of a consideration. Not that they always did. There's some really obvious stunt doubles in lots of big movies. Terminator 2 is notorious for some obvious Arnold stunt doubles, but I suspect that maybe it's a concession that they can make with TV shows in the 90s and the 80s that people are going to be watching this on like blurry 480i scanline ridden TV. No one's going to notice any of this shit. But I appreciate getting shows like this in this level of quality. It makes them very pleasant to watch. So yeah, it's an okay episode. It's got a couple of little moments between Mulder and Scully. But pivoting to a ghost does feel a little bit different. I mean, I suppose Jersey Devil was meant to be like, this beast man that's been sort of living as a separate species in the forest. Like, that's also very separate to other things, but that at least sort of comes from a place of science where it's like, no, this is like an evolution thing where this just hidden species has been there. Ghost is a little bit different. It goes into a very different territory, and I don't know how much X-Files does this. I don't know if X-Files is going to go into a lot of ghost stuff, but I'll take like mutants, and I'll take people who are actually from another dimension or other planets or whatever. And it's not that I don't like ghosts. If I'm watching a movie that's about ghosts, I'm in a ghost mood. I'm fine with that. But this did feel like a bit of a pivot to me, just based on what the show's felt like so far. So yeah, I mean, I didn't hate it. It's not a terrible episode. It's just, yeah, I don't know. I just never got into the main character's plight. And it just wasn't as interesting once it wasn't telekinesis. I was down for Carrie in the X-Files, and I thought that's why she was such a timid character. I thought they were presenting her as this timid character because the rage from within, which again is very Carrie, is like a contrast to that. This is like what she's bottling up or something. And all that analysis went out the window because it wasn't that at all. So her characteristics are basically meaningless throughout the rest of the episode. But anywho, that is my thoughts. That's the review on episode 6 Shadows. Let me know what you think of this one in the comments. I will look ahead and see what's coming next time. Episode 7 is called Ghost in the Machine. Oh, hello. It's a Halloween episode, apparently. This is the description on IMDb. On Halloween, Mulder and Scully investigate the death of a corporate executive who may have been murdered by a thinking computer. Okay. I could be into this, right? This is kind of my jam. I'm all for AI going rogue and killing someone. I think there's much entertainment to be had from that. I'm on board. So let's see where this goes. But yes, thank you very much for joining me. You can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and keep it all coming. But of course, you can also support us simply by liking and commenting. Those things help other people find the reviews, so it does help if you do that. But that is the show. Thank you very much for joining me. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?